Hey Book Dragons, welcome back. I've got a book review for you today. Let's get right to it. So I recently finished Salem's Lot by Stephen King. And I've got a rather complicated history with Stephen King. Of the few books I've read, which are I read the first 5 books, well, if you count The Wind Through the Keyhole, which I read as book 4.5. So I read 5 books in the Dark Tower series, and I started The Stand, and now Salem's Lot. So if you count all of those, my history with Stephen King, other than The Dark Tower, is a little bit rocky. I almost DNF'd it. I had to put The Stand down indefinitely. I'll get back to it eventually, but it was just such a slow build for me that I was just like, I need to get to other things. I'll come back to this one. So I do want to read The Stand. And the Dark Tower series is great, but it suffers from the same typical Stephen King style of writing, which is very much a slow burn in most cases. Now, Wizard and Glass was a much better, much faster paced book. Actually, so was The Wastelands. But overall, it's still kind of one of those series that you kind of have to, be in there for the long haul because it's going to take a while to get going. That was not the case with Salem's Lot. I was hooked right from the get-go. And I mean right from the get-go. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about some of the things I liked. And there wasn't really a whole lot that I didn't like in this book. So this is going to be a very positive review for me. So let's get right to it. If you're not familiar with Salem's Lot, it takes place in a small town called Jerusalem's Lot, which, funny enough, was named after someone's pet boar, I believe it was, that had this special place that they like to go and sit in the shade, and if you went near their spot, that they would raise all hell. And so eventually the whole town itself became known as Jerusalem's Lot instead of that one particular spot that the animal laid in. So our main protagonist is Ben Mears. He is a writer of mysteries, thrillers, things like that, and he spent time as a child in the town of Jerusalem's Lot. So the very beginning of the story has these 2 unnamed men. One of them's a boy, and then one of them's a grown man. And they're not named at the beginning, and you'll find out who they are later in the story. But as it gets into the meat of the story, we're introduced to Ben. He's on his way back to Jerusalem's Lot to get some inspiration for a new book he's writing based on something horrific that happened to him in his childhood. And what that was involved the Marston house. Now, the Marston house is this big, creepy-looking, rundown home that a hitman lived in with his wife after quote-unquote retirement. And he and his wife eventually died in the house and everything like that. And he had a pretty traumatic experience going up to that house as a kid because everybody was daring him to go in and see how much time he could spend in the house. And so he did, and he had just this really traumatic and creepy experience as a result. And if you know anything about Stephen King novels, you know that they often involve creepy houses where, kids dare each other to go into the house, and at least it was that way in it. And so he has this experience, and so he wants to, I don't know if he necessarily wants to relive it, but he wants to go back and hopefully get some inspiration for his new book by visiting his hometown. And so he takes up residence in a group home where a lot of different people are renting, and he plans to stay for a period of time to work on his book. Other characters in the story are a woman by the name of Susan Norton, and we'll talk about her a little bit here in a few moments. And then there are some other characters as well, such as Mark Petrie, who's a young boy in the town, Matt Burke, who is a teacher in the town, Father Callahan, who's a priest. And one of the other main characters in the story is kind of interesting because when Ben first comes to town, he intends to possibly rent the Marston place, just the main floor, to live in and be right there in the middle of the action, so to give him the most inspiration possible. But it turns out that somebody has purchased the old Marston house in hopes of quote-unquote renovating it. And I put those quotes very loosely. But it is a man by the name of Kurt Barlow and his business partner Richard T. Straker. They have hopes of opening up a business in the town and everything like that. So because he can't rent the Marston house, he finds another place to rent in town. And what kicks the story off is a couple of kids end up going missing. One of them goes permanently missing. We don't really find out what happened to him. And then another one, well, I'll just let you find out, because I don't want to give away too many spoilers, or really any at all. I'm trying to keep this spoiler free, but the disappearance of the kids is the catalyst for a manhunt, and things just begin to happen quicker and quicker and quicker. A bunch of people in the town get involved in the search for the boys, one of which is Ben Mears, and for a time he's even suspected of maybe having a part in it, because he's this new guy in town. Nobody really knows who he is. Most everybody who did know him as a kid is probably gone or moved on or whatever. And but they remember his parents. And so he gets involved in the search, and a few other people do as well. And he becomes really close with Susan Norton, who is a woman in the town. She lives with her parents at the time, and it's just a very close-knit small community, maybe 300 people in this town, I think, at the most. And they just all kind of get to know each other really well, with the exception of this mysterious duo of Straker and Barlow. And things just get even more creepy because the main businessman, Kurt Barlow, is always said to be off purchasing goods, but then every night there's this one solitary light on in the top story of the house, and it's only on at night. It's never on in the daytime. Nobody ever sees Kurt Barlow during the daytime. They always see his business associate, Mr. Straker, and Straker is this eccentric gentleman, very prim, very proper, very eloquently spoken, and they just seem from another world. And so after a while, they come to be the main suspects in the disappearances, and more people eventually end up going missing, and weird things happen to them. These people turn up that nobody knows what happened to, and they're acting strangely. They only show up at night, and you get the feeling that there's a vampire in town. And that's all I'm going to say. You need to read this book. As I mentioned before, Stephen King is not known for pacing his books well. And I'm sure part of that's intentional. He's really big on character development. He's really, really big on building out the scene. He would be a good movie director if he wanted to direct movies, because he's very methodical about building out the scene and building out the surroundings and telling you all about the history of the town and things like that. So there's a lot of work that goes into his novels, and that's why they're not necessarily so evenly paced. But Salem's Lot is a different story. It's only about 600 pages, little over that, and it just it kept going. It kept going. Just I was hooked from page 1 up until the end of the book. I think it only took me 3 or maybe 4 days to finish the book. Just a fantastic read. Now, in terms of characters, if I was to compare this to The Dark Tower, I think I like the characters better in The Dark Tower. That would probably be the only downside I would say to this book. Not that it's necessarily a downside. The characters in this book are great. I just think I like the characters in The Dark Tower a bit more. I think I felt more of a connection to the characters in The Dark Tower, so far anyway. But that is not to say that the characters are not well fleshed out in this book. They are fantastic. Overall, I have to say this is my favorite Stephen King book that I've read. And that's really saying something because, as I mentioned, I love the Dark Tower series. I'm just super into the Dark Tower. But as far as pacing, as far as the story progression, as far as just the intensity and the raw edge of your seat power that the story evokes, I'd have to say this is my favorite Stephen King book. And wow, I was just completely blown away. Especially the characters of Kurt Barlow and Art. Well, I don't know. Richard Straker isn't that engaging of a character, I guess all. But Kurt Barlow, wow, I was really engaged in Kurt Barlow's character. I couldn't wait to find out more about him and see what makes him tick. And as far as an antagonist, wow, just a fantastic character. Fantastic villain. Ben Mears is an awesome protagonist, and the ending, a lot of people say Stephen King does not write great endings in most cases. I thought the ending of this book was really good, and it was very sad. I'll put it that way. It was very sad because you hope that it will end differently than it did. At least it was that way for me. But despite it not ending the way I'd hoped it would, it was an extremely satisfying ending, and I just can't rave about it enough. It's just extremely well written, well thought out. I know with Salem's Lot, Stephen King was heavily inspired by Dracula. His thing was, what would happen if Count Dracula showed up in the 20th century. So it's really interesting and well written. I just think it's worth anybody reading at least once, or at least giving it a try. So let me know what you thought in the comments below. I've just kind of given you an overview. This is just a fantastic book, guys, and I hope you read it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, as always. And make sure that you are reading more books. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.